Alright, today I'm going to show you how to log into Vivox and log out. It's going to be pretty basic. It's slightly intermediate. I may cover some advanced topics, so you may have to look some stuff up, but I will do my best to explain it. So you're going to want to go to the asset store, search for Vivox Voice and Text Chat, and then you're going to want to import it, and then this window will pop up right here. And so you don't want to import everything. I will say though that this editor right here with all these like 5 scripts, you can keep these if you want, but I noticed that if you do keep them, when you use these scripts to build, it does take a little bit longer than without it, but it comes with the auto builder right here, and it'll build for iOS, Android, Xbox, all the consoles basically. It'll do it for you, but I'm choosing not to use that. You are going to want to keep plugins and the runtime. You don't need the samples. You can get rid of that. You can keep the tests if you want, but they're not really necessary. But feel free to look over the scripts. I don't think it changes much as far as the build times. And you can also keep the Unity package first steps if you just want a little overview on what you should be doing, because I'm not going to cover everything in this video. So basically just import plugins and runtime, and I'm gonna let that do its thing. Alright, so I forgot to mention that the supported Unity versions are 2018 3.14 or higher. I'm using 2019 4.15, and it works just fine. So all I did right here is I created a new C# script. Right here, create, bam, C# script, open it up. It's the default, so you're going to want to go up top. We're going to use Vivox Unity, and we're using system.component model, and I'll explain why we're using that a little bit later. So, alright, so I like to delete these little comments just because I don't like them. You can delete the update. We're not going to need that. What we are going to need is the awake. And awake is called before start, if you didn't know, when Unity is processing the script. So we're going to create Vivox Unity and then client. And we are using the namespace up here, Vivox Unity, so it's unnecessary to use it, but I use it just in case. Let's say you want to import Mirror or another networking service or anything. They also might have a class called a client, so just so there's no errors later on down the road, I'm just going to call it that. So we're going to create a client. We're going to create, I guess we'll go private Yuri. So this is basically the server address. I don't even know what Yuri stands for. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, so right here it says it's missing it. So all you got to do is just kind of click somewhere between these little red squigglies, press Control period, and it'll pop up. And then you're gonna want to go using system, or you could have just clicked on it, and then it'll give you an option somewhere in here to implement it. That's actually, I guess it's too late. Anyways, it's gonna be new Yuri. Alright, so right now we're gonna leave that blank. We'll fill it in later, but it will pop up an error later because it's blank. Private string issuer equals, we're just going to leave it blank for now. I'm going to duplicate these with Control D, and then I'm just going to change the names. Actually, I didn't need 4, sorry about that. I only need 3 or 2 more. So one of them is going to be domain, and the last one is going to be the key. I'm going to call this token key. You can call it whatever you want though, but it's basically the password. And then we're going to do a time span. Gonna create a time span, call it time span equals new time span. We're creating a new instance of it in 90 seconds. That's what Vivox recommends. Alright, so I'm gonna create a private iLogin session. This is gonna be to log in. Call it login session. Bam. You're gonna wanna put this up top instead of like in a method, and I'll show you why later. So we're gonna create a public void login, create a method. Alright, so we got the login method. We're also gonna want to create a login result, so public void login result, because I want to show you something. And what are we gonna do? I guess we need a logout button also. So public void log out. Bam. Alright, so in the awake method, we're gonna want to create a new instance of the client. So client equals new client, and let's see here. So we got a new client. Alright, then we're gonna want to uninitialize it, and this is to get rid of any open clients that may not have been closed, just in case you like enter play mode in Unity and then exit out. It may not close properly, so this will solve that on the next time you play it again. And then we're gonna do client dot initialize. So if you forget this step, Vivox will not run. You need the client to connect to the Vivox servers. Alright, and also what you're gonna want to do is don't destroy on load. You can do this .game object. I'm just gonna do this because it's basically the same thing. So you're basically saying don't destroy this class of login credentials, which, because it inherits from mono behavior, it's eventually gonna go on a game object, and I'm gonna call it login credentials. Yeah, we'll just go login credentials like that, and then you can drag login credentials to login credentials. I'll probably call it Vivox Manager later on, just because that will be like the main thing controlling Vivox. Okay, and don't destroy on load basically means when you load a new scene, it's not going to destroy it, so your chat communication will still work across every time you change a scene. Okay, we're gonna create another method called on application quit. I guess it's Unity's method. I'm not creating it. And in here we're going to do client.uninitialize, and this, if you go right here, it says uninitialize this client instance. If this client is not initialized, it will do nothing. But basically this closes all Vivox resources to the server. So this is so everything will close out properly just using this method. You don't even have to log out, it'll do it for you. Alright, so in the login method, I added a username, string username, so you're going to want to add that. Then you're going to want to create an account ID, call it account ID or whatever you want, and equals new account ID. There's a option to pass the URI, but we're not going to do that. We're going to do the issuer name and domain. So we're going to go issuer, the username that we're passing, and the domain. Okay, and then we're going to go login session, the one we created earlier, up top here, and then login session, begin login, and it's going to take a URI. We got the server URI, which is a URL for the server, the access token. So this way of making an access token is provided by Vivox as a default way to use when you're in development. If you actually want an app that is able to be production ready, you're gonna want to do the more secure way, unless you don't need secure communications, but it's not recommended to do it this way once you're ready to release your app to the public. This is only for development purposes. I'll show you the more advanced way later. I was able to figure it out. and it was kind of hard, but yeah. Anyways, so we're gonna go login session, get login token, the token signing key. So we're gonna get the token key, and then the time span. The token key is a password, and the time span is how much time until how long this login session is valid for, or the token is valid for, before it times out. And then we're going to do an async callback. Alright, for the async callback, there's a couple different ways to do this. I'm going to show you the way that Vivox does it in the example. And so basically this is a lambda expression. If you didn't know what that meant, that's a lambda expression. So these are things you may want to look up because they're not for the scope of this video, but I'll do my best to explain what's going on. Okay, so going to close that. You're going to create some open close brackets because I'm basically creating another method like this where the public void, the start and end, and then we're going to do a try, some more close brackets, and then we're going to do login session and login. And this is why I had you do the actually never mind, not yet. So login session and login, and then we're gonna take this AR, which is the IAsyncResult, and end login. As you can see right here, it needs a IAsyncResult as a parameter. So we're gonna pass that. And so basically, what's happening is the logins, the session is logging in, and once it's done, it's gonna right here. It takes the callback, which is the AR, even though it says IAsyncResult. And so once it's done logging in, then it's going to call this end login, which is the result of the login. So once the login is done, the end login method takes the result if the login is done, and then the end login method is starts. Okay, I don't know if that made sense. Okay, so catch, exception. You always got to catch exceptions or errors. So this is a generic error, which is exception, but there's different types of exceptions. That's more advanced programming, but you can stick to the basics for now. And then you're going to want to get the message, so debug.log log e.message. E is for exception. You can call it what you want. Alright, and then so basically after, if it makes it past the catch, that means you can run more code here, but doesn't mean it's logged in. So if you run more code here, you're not necessarily logged in. So what we're gonna want to do is go down here and create another method, public void login status. And so when I have methods with more than one word, I like to use an underscore, and that's basically so I can differentiate my methods versus like Unity, like on application quit. It's just one word, so it kind of helps me read my code better. Alright, so basically what this callback is, to recreate it, you can go up top. This is one way of recreating it, private async callback, and we can call this login callback, and then so the login result, you're going to want to pass an async result or IAsync result, and just call it IAsync result. And up here in the start function, we can do login callback equals new async callback, and the target would be login result. So this creates a new async callback which takes the login result. So we got the async callback up here, login callback, which is this. We're creating a new instance of the async callback, and it takes this method login result, and the login result is right here, which has the method async result, which is an IAsync result. And if you look at begin login, it takes an async callback, but when you scan over this AR, it says IAsyncResult. So that confused me very much at the when I first started learning this. So and it has to do with this being a delegate. Async callback is a delegate void. So once you learn about delegates, you'll understand it more. And instead of passing AR, I'm gonna do Control KC in Visual Studio, and that'll comment out all that code. We're gonna get rid of the AR, and we're gonna pass in this login callback up here. And so we passed in the login callback, and we have no errors. And this is an async callback, which is what begin login is asking for. So that's one way of creating a callback, which holds a result. And this login result is what's going to be called when the begin login method is completed. And basically, you can take all this code right here. I'm going to control copy, control V to paste it, and then to uncomment code, you can go control KU in Visual Studio 2019. And then instead of this AR that we previously had, we'll just pass in the async result, which is this. And bam, there it is. And so I'm kind of going into detail to the best of my ability, because you're going to see this a lot in Vivox, in all these methods that I'm going to be showing you. So it's better to kind of get a nice overview of it now, and then you'll begin to understand it more as we keep going. So so this is one way of doing it, and then here is another way of doing it. So instead of creating this callback up top, and instead of initializing it right here, we can literally just take this login result and plug it in right here where it wants the callback. So login result, and bam. And notice how you don't have to do the little parentheses for a method. You don't, for some reason, you don't need to do that for delegates. And the reason why it takes, why it works, even though it doesn't say async callback right here, async callback, because that's initially what I thought you would call the async callback and then throw it in there, but you'd have to return something down here, return. But yeah, so you don't need to do all that, and I think it is because async callback is a delegate void, so you don't need to return anything because it's void. The method, the parameter for async callback just has to match. So right here, login result matches public async callback. So if you scan over it, system IAsyncResult, so it matches. So this matches what async callback matches, and that's why it works. That probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but hopefully you'll get the hang of it and read up a little bit on it. Okay, so I don't want to do it this way. I'm just going to do it the way that Vivox does it, because it's just easier, because it's all in one method. So I'm going to uncomment this, control KU, and we're going to get rid of that. Let's just delete that, go back to the AR, use the lambda expression to call it, bam. Alright, so this is to log in. Okay, so basically when we log in, we want to know if we logged in or not. So this is where login status comes in. So first, we're going to create another method, and you don't have to create a method for this, but Vivox does it, and I found it useful. We're going to call it bind login callback listeners. You don't have to call it this, but I like to spell things out, because the more my code looks like English, the easier it is for me to follow along, because I'm still kind of a beginner at coding. Alright, and if it's easy to read, I don't have to document it, which helps also. A trick I learned from Infallible Code. Alrighty, so what am I doing? Okay, so Alright, so I'm going to add a bool called bind to this method and an iLogin session called login sesh. And the reason why is because later on when you're dealing with multiple sessions, it'll just be easy to bind these callbacks instead of having to call them individually, because they will add up because there's a lot of callbacks to monitor. Okay, so login sesh, and we're gonna go to so actually if you scroll through here, you see the wrench, you see the box. If you ever see any lightnings, that means it's an event. And so we're gonna subscribe to that event. The publisher subscriber model, pub sub model, you can look that up if you want, get more understanding. If you've never worked with events or delegates, it's kind of like what the async callback was doing. It was a delegate, so but this is an event that we're subscribing to. So property change, so on our login session, if the property of this login session is changed, we're going to add this method down here called login status. So we're going to type in login status without the parentheses again, because we're dealing with delegates and events. So right here you'll notice we get an error, and if you hover over property change, it says property changed event handler. And so this is where the system component model comes in. That's what Vivox uses to access the property changed event handler, which means we're going to have to pass some arguments in this login status. And so we're going to pass object sender, and we're going to pass property event args, not the handler. You're going to want to do the arguments, and you can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it login args. Alright, and so we're going to take this sender, I'm going to go variable source, and this is going to equal, we know that it's an iLogin session because we're subscribing to the iLogin session. So iLogin session, and we're basically casting the sender because it's an object, so we're converting this object sender back into an iLogin session. And variable is the same as going iLogin session. Variable just automatically knows what, or var automatically knows what you're trying to access. So if you hover over source, it's an iLogin session source. Okay. Also, because the iLogin session is the sender, so this is the sender, and this is the property changed event delegate that we're trying to monitor or subscribe to, and that's how we know it's iLogin session. Okay, so then we're gonna create a switch, and we're gonna switch through source, and we're gonna go to state. So you can scroll through or type it, and this is basically a login state that we're gonna switch through. So we're gonna alright, and then if you don't know how to use a switch, I would look it up or just follow along, and you'll get an understanding of it. So we're gonna go to login state, logging in, and then you don't use the semicolon, you use the colon, and then you break it with the semicolon. And so so basically, if the state, we're switching through login states, and all these states are logged in, logged out, logged in, logging out. And so we're going to switch through all of these. And so one of the cases is logging in. So logging in. So that's, we're trying to see if source state matches logging in right here. And then right here we're going to have our code. So we're just going to do debug.log logging in. And I'm just going to copy this again, Control D, and then instead of logging in, we're going to do logged in, and then right here, logged in. Okay, and so you can do all the other states, logging in, which are logged out, but it's not really, it doesn't really matter, and I'm going to show you why right now. Because in the logout button, we're going to take our login session, and to log out is so simple. It's literally login session logout, and that's it. Now if you hover over logout, it says log the account out of Vivox system. This will not raise a property event. So up top, we're subscribing to property changed, and right here it's saying that it's not going to raise an event for changing the state to logging state logged out. And so right here we're searching for login state logged in, login state logging in, and then we could put a case for login state logged out, although that state will be set to that upon completion of the function. So once this login session is logged out, it will go to login state logged out, but it's not going to raise an event for it, so we don't have to listen for it necessarily. But you can add the cases for that if you want, just for peace of mind, or if you want to run code, but it's not going to get called through this property change that we're subscribing to. Alright, so if you go back up top to the bind login callback listeners, you'll notice that the error went away, and that you can see the object sender and property changed event args is the correct parameters that we need to pass to the login status method for it to do its thing. Okay, so I'm going to add this little bind, if bind. And so just by saying if bind is the same as saying if bind equals true. And there's also the shortcut of an exclamation mark, and so that's saying if not bind. So if bind doesn't equal true, which is the same as saying if bind is not equal to true, it's also the same as saying if bind equals false. Okay, just in case you didn't know. Alright, so we're going to add that to the if, and then for the else we'll do copy that, Control C, Control V to paste, and then you're just going to add a minus. So this binds to it and this unbinds. So this subscribes to the event, this unsubscribes with the minus equals. Okay, and so where you're going to want to put this is right before you log in. So right after the account ID, you can go bind login callback listeners, and we're going to pass true and the login session. And then in the catch, so basically if there's an error, you're going to want to unbind, because you're going to want to unsubscribe so there's no errors or events raised that for a session that didn't log in. Okay, so we bound it, and now we're unbinding it. And also when you log out, you can unbind it. So right here, when we log out, we can we'll do it after. So after we log out, we can go bind callback listeners false and login session. Alrighty. Which is also why you want the login session somewhere. It's not I don't know if it's a global variable, but just, you know, up top. I forget what they call these variables up here. But because if you just had it within the method, then you wouldn't be able to access that instance of the login session, because it would just be contained within this method like the account ID is. Okay. Alright, and that is basically all there is to that, I'm pretty sure. So you can just go create a quick UI for this. Okay, so in the login state, logged in session, I added a $, and this basically is a string interpolation. It allows me to add a parameter to a string variable. And so right here is the login session ID, and it's basically the name of the player. And so I added that, and then I added a method login user, and this is a wrapper method for the login. And basically, because I'm gonna add this to a button, and buttons don't like methods with parameters, but there is some cases where you can use dynamic parameters. Okay, so I played this before and I got an argument. Here, let me play it again just so you can see. Go to login and I get this error: argument exception account ID argument contains one or more invalid characters. So if you go to the Vivox documentation where it says log a user into a game on the client SDK basics, these are all the allowed characters for a character name, so you can kind of check over that. And what I did here in my code is I have a space. Vivox does not want you to have a space, so no spaces in names. So I'm gonna have to change that. So I'm gonna go back to Unity, change this code, do an underscore, save it, go back to Unity. Alright, and it should work. Okay, so I got another error where it says object reference is not set to an instinct of an object. So what I forgot to show you guys is so what's basically this login session up here, we never gave it a value. So all you got to do is just go login session equals, we're going to get the client, so client, and then get login session, and then we're going to pass in this account ID, and that's why we made the account ID. Forgot to show you guys that, sorry about that. So basically, yeah, that's how you get the value for this login session, because you can't create a new like, but if I try to go login session equals new login session, it's not going to work because this I means it's an interface, and you can't create new instances of interfaces. So you gotta pass values basically, and that'll give it its value. Yeah. All right, hopefully that makes sense. All right, so save that, back to Unity, and it should work now. All right, logged in session, and logged in test name. So I don't know what this means right here, but it's probably in the documentation somewhere. And then we're logged in as test name. And then my UI isn't very fancy, but this is why we have debug.log statements. I'll show UI in a later video. Alright, thanks, hope you liked it. I'll be making more soon. Alright, bye.